This video is brought to you by MoviePalette.com and enter ROOM15 for 15% off of your palette. Hey horror fans, welcome back to 1237, back with another review. As I continue my run through of films based on real life serial killers, and since my last review was for the 1995 made for TV movie, HBO movie, Citizen X, I figured I would do the only other film I have of the same killer, which is Andre Chikatilo. And this is a film that I've had for a while. And originally I was going to stay away from movies like this because this would be more along the lines of like a fictional story, like a fictional dramatization of a real story. I was going to stay away from films like probably the 1987 TV movie of Night Stalker, Toby Hooper's Eaten Alive, because that's kind of like what his Chainsaw Massacre is to Ed Gein. It's like what Eaten Alive is to Joe Brill. I was going to, or even though I've reviewed The Clove Hitch Killer, I was going to stay away from loosely based or loosely inspired films. But I already had this one, and even though the last name is different, his name is still Andre, it's still in Russia, it still plays out pretty much the same as an Andre Chikatilo film. It's just more so, a lot of it is heavily fabricated. But I figured it's closer than other films that are loosely based upon or loosely inspired. So I figured why not? And it's actually an Italian film. And again, it's one I've had for years. It is 2004's Evilenko, which stars Malcolm McDowell as Andre Evilenko, which is the film version of Andre Chikatilo. Now, I remember when I first saw this, I was at the store that I go to. I had found Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer, and I went to go buy that. And of course, I always talk to the people that are working there. And this one guy that was working there asked if I had heard of this. I said it was along the same lines, but of this other killer. He said he had just brought his copy there. And I was like, no, but I'll definitely check it out. So I bought it upon his recommendation. And at the time, I didn't know too much about Chikatilo. I knew him by name, face, and that he had a staggering body count. But I didn't really know the details of his crime. And actually, not so much the film, but this is the 2-disc DVD, which on disc 2 it has a 27-minute sort of feature on Chikatilo himself and how he was the basis for the film. So that was kind of my introduction to Chikatilo. Now, it was directed by David Grieco, if I pronounce that correctly. It's an Italian film, but it's not dubbed. I think around this time, Italian films stopped doing the dubbing thing, and they don't really care about accents. I mean, McDowell, you can't really change his voice. He still has his Malcolm McDowell a British accent. I think even the psychiatrist character, which is based on Bukanovsky, he has his English accent, but some of the other characters have their Russian accents. But written and directed by David Grieco, stars Malcolm McDowell as of Andre Evilenko, Martin Kisokis, if I pronounce that correctly. He plays Vadim Timurovich Lesiev, which is based on Inspector Burakov in real life. Ronald Pickup as Aaron Richter, which is Dr. Bukanovsky in real life. Francis Barber as Fenya Evilenka, which I didn't know Russia was one of those countries where the last name can be masculine or feminine, where her real name was Fedosia. And I'm guessing Alexei Chadyuk as Captain Rumensky. That's supposed to be a Fedosov, or his real life counterpart is supposed to be a Fedosov. But yeah, apparently this is based on Grieco's novel, The Communist Who Ate Children, which I've never seen in person. I don't know if that is like a fabricated story or a book actually about a Chikatilo. So, as I've said before, this one is more accurate. This is definitely more of the historical film, but this one is more about the investigation. You do get scenes with Jeffrey DeMunn as Chikatilo. You know, you see him either right before or right after one of his kills, but it's more about the uh, bureaucracy and just the botched attempts at a horrible investigation that lasted years. And how Chikatilo was able to get away with it for so long. Whereas here it's kind of half and half. It really tones down the investigation. It does follow Evilenko more as a character. So if you're the kind of person that just wants to see the killer do his thing, and as far as MO and victim profile, it's pretty much the same. They didn't really take any real life instances. Like normally when I review a film, I'll be like, oh, third victim was name and she was killed where and how, but in real life it was depicted this way. His body count, I mean, uh, convicted of 52 of the 53 he was tried for and confessed to 56. It's hard to pick out exactly which victim they're supposed to be referencing, but where this one is mostly fictionalized, it doesn't really matter. But the way the victims are portrayed and how he kills them is pretty much the same as real life. So I guess if you want to see more of a Chikatilo film, it would be this one. Though I would still recommend a, a Citizen X. Now, I also said that Jeffrey DeMunn looks more like Chikatilo pre-trial. You know, when he still has his hair, because it was uh, common Russian practice to shave the prisoner during trial or when they were in jail to prevent from lice. The film doesn't show that, so I think most people know Chikatilo to be bald. But Jeffrey DeMunn looks more like Chikatilo before the trial, before his head was shaved. Whereas I think McDowell looks more like him after, which his head is shaved throughout almost the whole movie, but then he is like completely bald for a quick scene at the very end. So I would say there he looks more like a of Chikatilo, where DeMunn looks more like him pre-trial. I will say that, well, also, like in my review for Citizen X, I am going to be giving kind of a trigger warning because not only was he a very a sadistic, you know, and what he did to those bodies, how he mutilated the bodies, and his victims were mostly children and young women. And this movie does kind of show some of that to a certain extent. I mean, Italian films are always, you know, able to push boundaries a bit more. I mean, it doesn't come right out and showing him really doing harmful things to kids, but there are some pretty uncomfortable scenes, especially the one in the beginning when it shows how he lost his teaching job, which I don't know if the circumstance is the same as real life. I know he held a girl late after class, but I don't know if the events are the same. But like that scene where it shows him, you know, taking his pants off and talking to her, it doesn't completely go there. You know, it's not sallow or anything like that, but it can get fairly uncomfortable. It's definitely a more bloody movie than Citizen X. Now, it's not a gory slasher film, but there are some scenes, you know, where the blood is all over the place. Some of the more effective scenes is when they don't show anything. Like there's this one shortly after the Lesiev character, uh, the lead investigator, is brought in, and they find this young girl out in the woods, and she's below the camera. You can't see her, but it's just through exposition what they're saying that just puts the image in your head that makes it more effective. Pretty much saying how they can't get a semen sample until they pull the branch out, but the branch is stuck. But they have to get it out because her mother's standing over there. It's stuff like that that makes it more effective than actually seeing it. And especially the more the film goes on, the more fabricated it gets, especially as the investigation picks up, and then definitely the interrogations is wildly fabricated. So yeah, definitely if you want accuracy, go for this. But I guess if you want just the surface level, how did he kill them? I want to see him being a killer. I imagine this is not far off from the real thing in that aspect. Then I guess I would pick this film. And then we have the performances of this, which there are some weird things that a McDowell does that I'm not sure what the angle is or what the direction was. I will say him and Kasokis. I hope I know I'm botching that name, but I think they both do a good job. Some of the supporting characters do. I'll say this has a much better cast. I mean, Stephen Rea, Donald Sutherland, uh, Jeffrey DeMunn, Max von Sydow, they all do a great job. I'll even say I think Jeffrey DeMunn, for what little he gets to do, might even be a better Chikatilo. Granted, yes, I know this is supposed to be a more fictionalized account. He's not probably not supposed to be Andre Chikatilo. He's supposed to be Andre Evilenko. But it feels like they're basing the whole performance off the whole like madman that Chikatilo portrayed himself in court. Just which there's not a whole lot of footage of that you can find, but when he does speak, he does sound. I mean, of course, it's Russian, but he sounds fairly articulate. Whereas McDowell is portraying him as, he says his line delivery almost like he's crazy. Like one scene where his boss, once he starts working for the railways, asks why he has a bloody shirt in his bag. He's like, I helped a friend this morning. We slaughtered a pig. Or when the investigator says, I could bring your diary to the interrogation, he's like, oh, I knew it. And then even during the interrogation, he has this glass of water that he keeps putting in his mouth, swishing it around, spitting it back out. And the investigator asks him if he wants a fresh one, and he's like, why? I'm in here. And he tips it over. Not anymore. Like, he has a weird line to it. It's not like that in the beginning of the film. It's like the more the film goes on, I don't know if it's just to show him going crazy or, sort of his descent. But even if you look up videos of Chikatilo in court, he still sounds very articulate and sound, even though he does look and do strange things while in court. But I don't know if that's the angle that they're going for performance-wise. But also, and I noticed this years ago, but like he walks like with his fingers like this behind him, but as the film goes on, like in the beginning he kind of walks with his hands at his side, but as the film goes on he starts to walk like with his arms behind his back and his fingers all like this and just like hunched over. Like he does that more and more as the film goes on. I don't know what that's about. I don't know if that's just something that McDowell came up with. I don't know if that's something someone told them about Chikatilo, which I doubt. So those are things that I think separates Evilenko from Chikatilo. So I would say if you put the performances side by side, I would probably say Jeffrey DeMunn. Granted, even though he has less scenes, he doesn't really get to do as much. I do think he does a better job. It's not to say Malcolm McDowell is bad, because he's not. He does have some really good scenes, but again, I don't know if they're just playing off the idea that he was pretending, because some people think he was pretending to be mad in court. I don't know if that's what they're playing off of. And then the whole walk thing, I'm not sure what that was about. So I know I already did this for my Citizen X review, but as I always do, just sort of a brief clip notes of Andrei Chikatilo. He's widely considered to be the first major Russian serial killer, dubbed the Rostov Ripper or the Red Ripper, or according to Grieco's book, The Communists Who Ate Children, who murdered at least 52 women and children between 1978 and 1990 in Russian, Ukrainian, and Uzbekistani territories. He was arrested once in September of '84 as a suspect, but due to forensic trouble and a botched bureaucracy, he was released to kill again. In April of '92, he confessed to 56 murders and was sentenced to death in 52 of the 53 that he was tried for. And he was finally executed by a single bullet on February 14th of 1994 at the age of 57. He was known to be a sexual sadist and a necrosadist, which, being impotent, he could only reach arousal and climax through a victim's pain, suffering, death, and mutilation, both before and after death, which is why the bodies were graphically and wildly mutilated, especially to the genital area. His body count is believed to be surpassed by Russian serial killer Mikhail Popkov, with 78 confirmed kills, though he's confessed to 81, and he was apprehended in 2012. Chikatilo's crimes were also running concurrently with another Ukrainian serial killer of Anatoly Onoprienko, who also had 52 victims and was apprehended in 1996 and died in 2013. So now we come to Evilenko, and one thing it does is that it moves from Rostov to Kiev. Now, I probably should have checked, but I don't know if Kiev is an actual place in Russia, although Rostov is mentioned. So it takes place in Kiev. It opens up March 14th of '84, where it shows him, well, actually it opens up with him with a girl in the forest, telling a very creepy story. Cuts to black, her screaming. But then it says March 14th, '84, where he attempts to molest a female student. And again, this scene can get pretty uncomfortable. Again, trigger warning. It does show him, dropping his pants, trying to get her to do stuff, talking about it. But then she laughs at him, sort of hinting at his impotence, and even this young girl who doesn't understand anything is laughing at him. So that enrages him. But she's able to get away, and then he's forced into resignation. But because he's a party member, it's able to fly under the radar, and no one has to know why, which is true. He was known for he was actually known to molest several children, but it was March of '81 when he was forced to resign, and he told his wife it was due to political differences, which this movie does play up his proud communism. He's a very proud party member, and it does show, since he's a party member, how he's able to get away with a lot. This movie does downplay the idea that Soviet Russia could have a serial killer, like a Citizen X did. In fact, really the only thing it shows about the investigation is, well, actually, I'll get to that. Now, I'm guessing this is his first victim, which is an 11-year-old girl named Larissa at a bus stop, which his first victim as part of his uh, spree, his continuous spree, because he had a victim in 78, one in 81, and then in 84 is when his spree really began. And those were the victims that started being linked to this manhunt. And the first one of that was a woman named Larissa, but she was actually uh, 17. She was at the bus stop. She was lured into the woods. Says that his wife's name is Fenya. It was actually Theodosia. This has a. It's only mentioned twice, him being hired for these secret jobs for KGB. And then later on, when he's picked up as a suspect, he's able to give the KGB card and they're able to get him out of it. I've never read anything about Chikatilo being involved with KGB. Now, again, before I get too far, other than the, which I've shown dozens of times, other than the encyclopedic books and the documentaries that I've seen, I don't have any books specifically on a Chikatilo, but ones I do have with more of him in it than some other ones would be the 10 Worst Serial Killers and Cannibal Killers. And all of these, I've never seen anything about him having some sort of KGB job. So I'm guessing that's one of the major liberties that it takes. It shows a boy killed in the bathroom of a train. Again, even though it shows him flushing stuff down the toilet, which goes outside, and implies that's what he did with the body, and blood is all over the place. And as the cover suggests, he uses a straight razor. I think Chikatilo always used a knife because the bodies were found with at least 20 to 40 to 50, sometimes even to 70 stab wounds, and you don't really stab with a straight razor. But I don't know if he ever did it on a train. I think he always lured them into the woods or near the Don River. I know one victim he actually killed in his daughter's apartment. But I think this is more so just to show how he was able to gain their trust, how he talked to children, how he was able to sort of convince them certain things. Then we jump to Crimea of 1985, which is when Inspector Lesiev comes in, again played by Kasakis, which he came in 84. He came in right at the beginning. In real life, Burakov did. He came in right at the beginning, which was 84. Now, if we're going by 85, they say that 22 victims have now been linked to the single killer, which, if you're going by that, in 85 there were 23 already, and in 85 he only killed 2. So by the end of 85 there was actually 25 victims. It does mention a girl named Irina found in the woods. There was a girl named Irina found in the woods. I think that was the stick scene that I mentioned. Irina Gulyaeva, which was in 1985, one of 2 that year, but she was 18. If that is the same scene, the one with the stick was depicted as a young girl. I don't know if it's the same Irina. Again, where he had so many victims that they all just kind of, no pun intended, bled together, that you can't really pick any one out as sort of like this was a main victim of this period or that point in the investigation. His proud communism. The only thing it shows with the investigation is when they bring in all sex offenders and homosexuals, because that's who they thought the guilty party would be. Has to be either a homosexual because some of the victims were boys, or sex offenders. One of them is Chikatilo. But this is also in '85. It was actually '84 when he first became a suspect, or when he was first arrested as a suspect. Uh, but he was cleared when his blood and semen did not have the same type. The movie does not go into that. Instead, he's cleared because they want to get semen samples. He says he's impotent. Uh, Lesiev asks his wife. She says yes, he is impotent. But then he uses his get out of jail KGB card, and he's able to get out. Which, one thing that neither movie talked about is how there was a guy who was arrested and convicted and executed for Chikatilo's crimes. Uh, I couldn't remember exactly what year. I actually think it was '85 because that was his. That was the year he had the least amount of victims. So I'm pretty sure it was '85. Neither film goes into that. Um, it doesn't really talk about how the mentally challenged were brought in and beaten into confessions, but the other film does. In fact, bringing in all the homosexuals and sex offenders, that's where they meet Dr. Richter, who's a psychoanalyst, and he's the film stand-in for Bukanovsky, who was not a sex offender, he was not homosexual, but his character kind of becomes Bukanovsky. He comes up with a profile, which it doesn't really delve into. Um, it does show Evilenko talking about how his father deserved what he got when he came home from the war, because where they were communists, they didn't see war heroes as war heroes. They were seen as enemies. Can't remember exactly why, but it does go into that. Um, Released on the basis for being impotent, psychoanalyst. And then there's some scenes like with a book, well, Richter surveilling Evilenko by himself, even having a close call in a public bathroom. And then a scene where he sees Evilenko bringing a young girl out into the woods, and then he kind of plays psychoanalyst with him, pretending to be his father. And be like, "Come on, son, I know you missed me, son. It's me, your father." And then when he goes in for a hug, he kills him, which he did not kill Bukanovsky. In fact, Bukanovsky never met Chikatilo until his confession in 1990. Now, biggest, the biggest liberty that this movie takes, and I've only heard this once, and it might have even been on the documentary on Disc 2, but this movie plays on the idea that Evilenko has some sort of hypnosis powers. And there's a few scenes where he does this, like where he has this stare where he can make people do things, or just with a stare, like he can sort of hypnotize them to follow him, or to ignore him, or to let him go, or something. That happens several times in this film. And I don't remember exactly the context in which I heard that. Again, I only heard that once. Maybe someone said that Chikatilo had like a dead hypnotic gaze or stare, or he looked like mad and like this crazed stare that he looked like he was trying to hypnotize people. I don't know if that's the angle they're playing on. Again, it might have been the documentary where someone said something like that, or maybe it was like a local myth once he was caught that they thought he must have had mind powers because of how he was able to get away and get so many victims. But this film plays on that. I mean, we see him stare at people, and we'll see women just kind of blankly follow him. At one point, at a carnival, a woman at the BB gun game, he's staring at her, and she's just able to bring the BB gun around, and then set it down and follow him. There's even a guard at like this a metalworks factory, which there was a victim found there. A guard sees him with blood all over his face, which is a creepy looking shot. It looks cool, and he's just blood all over his mouth. And that stare drives the guy mad. Like, he's next seen in a straitjacket in the police station, and they want him to pick the killer out that he saw. But then, even in the lineup, he's still in the straitjacket. He points at Chikatilo, who's staring back at him. But then he just keeps pointing at other people, so he just looks like he's fucking insane. So, I guess he could drive people mad with his stare. And then later on, like with the last victim, when the guard at the train station saw him coming out of the woods and he was covered in dirt, blood smear on his face, he just checked his papers and let him go. This kind of has a scene like that, only here he's got like a scratched face and he just gives him a stare. The guy gives him his papers back. But then when Lesiev asks him what happened, he draws a blank. He can't remember. But he's also able to get a few scenes with women being able to follow him just from his stare. So they gave him the hypnotic mind powers, which, alright. And that is something I never really liked about the film. That was something I always thought was weird about it. It shows Chikatilo attempting suicide, which I don't think he ever did. Yeah, the guard seeing him come out and checking his papers. It said May of 1990, where his last victim was actually November of 90. Here I guess this is the only kind of bureaucracy that the movie tries to deal with, which is the captain wants to put off arresting him until they catch him with his pants down, which Lesiev says, you want to catch him murdering? And the guy says, 36, 37, what's the difference? Where in real life, they had him on surveillance for 6 days, and when he just started talking to kids in the park, that's when they arrested him. They arrested him at his home. Lesiev says, screw it. Arrested him at his home. He was arrested in a park. Now, the interrogation scene. This is wildly fabricated because, one, Lesiev conducts the interrogation. He has to because Richter was killed, where in reality, Bukanovsky was the one that got the confession. Whereas here, it's not the confession yet, it's just the interrogation. So Lesiev decides to kind of play his own game, dresses like a doctor, kind of checks Evilenko out because he was beat up. And then he lets Evilenko put that mind spell on him, and he pretends to be a child. He was like, why aren't you in school? I don't know. He talks like a child. His performance is really good. And, he lets him treat him like a victim. When he says, you can come stay with me. Take your clothes off. And he's already got his clothes off because he was just checking his wounds. So Lesiev gets naked. And then, he has him touch him. He bites Luciev's neck. And then that's when he sees that he can get aroused. And then that's when he snaps out of it. It says, see, you're not impotent. Is this what happens when you're with a small child? Look at your prick. That's a line that he says. I guess it's intense. But every time I watch it, I kind of forget that it goes that far. And I think we're supposed to believe that Evilenko has him under this mind spell. But either he knows that he can do that, or he's just impervious to it, and he's just going along with it to prove that he can be aroused by violence towards his victims. So then we get to the actual interrogation, which I never read anything about a diary where he drew all his murders, but the film talks about that. He confesses to Luciev, but which I don't remember exactly how many murders they had linked to the manhunt. The film says 36. I think it was around there. But in the film, he confesses by name, age, exact date, and where they were, 1 through 55. Is this long montage where we see pictures of kids, the guy writing it down, and all like the names and dates are just kind of the audio's layered over each other to show it's taken a lot of time. I do like how that was done, and we just see Lucien with like a tear running down his face. Also, I don't think Burakov's wife left him during the investigation, or left him until the investigation was over. So he confessed to 55, Chikatilo confessed to 56. And then we get one scene, which the thing that, and again, I know it's supposed to be loosely based on, it's not supposed to be a factually based film. But the thing that Chikatilo is mostly known for, which is just being a weirdo in the courtroom in his cage, which was also common practice. Though in his case, it was for protection of him, because it was just a wild circus of raging parents that wanted to get to him. We get a tiny, tiny scene of that, where it just shows him in his cage. He's like leaning against the bars. Are you Andrei Evilenko? Zoom in. Yes. And then it just says 2 years later. It shows his wife ironing his clothes, and then we get a shot of him, from earlier when he had brown hair still. And it ends with text saying he was executed February 14th, 1994, which is true. It says no one knows where or how, which we know it was by a single bullet, but no one does know where. But the thing it says about these two institutions, one American, one German, willing to pay a shit ton of money to have him turned over to them alive. I've never heard of any of that. I'm guessing that's another liberty it took. And then the movie ends. So, I don't go into this movie expecting it to be fully factual. I mean, this is one I can definitely, give some leeway, because at least, first of all serial killer movies say some of these have been dramatized, some names and events have been changed for privacy reasons, but, well, actually, even on the cover, the chilling story of the Soviet Union's most notorious serial killer. So it kind of plays it off like it's, an Andrei Chikatilo film. It comes with a short documentary about him. But where it says loosely based on, I know there's going to be a lot of liberties. But even then, it's still closer than a lot of films that are loosely based upon. And I would say this is a better made, taking all accuracy or inaccuracy out of the equation. I will say this one is probably just a better made, acted, and executed film. Not saying this one's bad, because it's not. It is well shot. You do have some nice camera work. You do have some nice music. The acting, for the most part, is good. I will say McDowell does have some weird choices. Again, I'm not sure what his direction was, but I will say this, probably because this one's more straightforward. This one is just more straight procedural, whereas this one is trying to cram in both the killer and his activities, the investigation, while also trying to have a very liberal use of creative liberties, all in 111 minutes. So at times it feels like it's kind of jumping around too much, or there's not enough here or there of some aspects. But definitely, if you're going for accuracy, check this out. This one is the most accurate that you're going to get. Now, I know that there's a Chikatilo series, probably similar to the Netflix Dahmer series. I think it's 16 episodes. I think you can only watch it on something called Playbill or something like that. I would love to check that out. It is a Russian program. But this is still a decently made film. Just know going into it that the look of the character, the setting, the MO, the victim profile, some of the investigation is true, but it's kind of half and half with the liberties and the facts. But this is one of those cases where it's not that the film gets it wrong. It's just they're taking a more creative approach to it. I've always liked the film, but I am a stickler for accuracy. So plus, I do like this film more. But this is still a fairly solid film. So that's both films I have on Andre Chikatilo. So my next review will be something else. I do have several more serial killer films to get to. I'm not sure which one I'll do next. I still have, I think, 2 on Richard Speck. I have a Kemper film, 1 Hillside Strangler film, 1 Boston Strangler film. I don't think either one are the ones that are known to be good. 1 on John List. Yeah. I have several more to get to, so stay tuned for those, and thank you for watching.